approach is basically a singing approach, and the idea in the sort of pure implementation of Kodai is that the child is going to be singing and doing music theory purely from a singing point of view for several years before they even touch an instrument. Now the Suzuki approach has the child starting violin at a very early age. So that's a little bit at odds with the Kodai approach. So the way that I reconcile this is we're going to make some modifications to the Kodai approach to accommodate starting the violin. We're going to learn the pitches on the violin in a slightly different order. We're going to do diatonic pitches instead of doing the Kodai sequence, which is more of a so-mi-la sequence. But we're also going to still be doing some of the vocal training. So I want to talk with the child about using their correct singing voice, singing in tune. We're going to work on that a little bit alongside of the violin work. The first thing that I want to share with the child about their singing is the difference between their chest voice and their singing voice. If you listen to someone sing out of tune, if they're having trouble matching pitch, if they're not really getting the high notes, they're probably using their speaking voice to sing. So we'll talk about the difference between their speaking voice and their singing voice. Sometimes I'll do a demonstration, which they find hilarious. So I'll sing, "Let us chase the squirrel up the," and this totally puts them at ease. Any mistakes that they make, they now feel totally relaxed with me because I've sounded so bad that they know that nothing that they do is ever going to sound worse than that. And then we'll talk about using their singing voice. And I usually call it their light voice. For a child, the terms higher and lower don't necessarily mean what they mean to a musician. Higher, a lot of times for a child actually means louder. So if you ask the child to sing higher, they're going to do exactly what you don't want to do, which is go even more into their chest voice or their speaking voice. Whereas if you ask them to sing lighter, it's much more likely that they're going to pop into that head voice. Another good way to get them into their singing voice is to ask them to sing softly. Now my goal is not for them to sing softly, but again it kind of helps them find that different way of using their voice. Let us chase the squirrel up the... So, and then the other thing that I want to do with a child, you know, maybe they found their singing voice, but they're not necessarily matching the pitch that I'm singing, but as long as they're kind of in the same general area, I will match whatever pitch they're singing at. And then they have an experience of singing in unison with me, and they know what it feels like to sing in unison with me. And then, you know, eventually they'll be able to match my pitch. And we're going to start moving toward having them sing always in the same, always at the same pitch center, typically the key of D. If they have a slightly lower voice, sometimes we'll do the key of C. But I try to be consistent with that one child and always sing in the same key. And I kind of make a note, you know, what key is usually better for that child. Now when they're singing at home, there's a whole nother element of having the parent practice with them, because the parent may or may not be able to provide a really good model of singing. Now some parents do, and that's fantastic when that happens. Some parents are not able to match pitch well themselves. That's okay. I will work with the parent for maybe just a couple of minutes, see if I can get the parent to find their head voice, their singing voice. If I can't do that in a couple of minutes, I'm not going to push the issue, because this is usually a very emotionally sensitive topic for an adult, and I really don't want to kind of push the point. So if they find it in a couple of minutes, great. If they don't, then I'll have the parent just let the child do it with the CD. We'll have them do it with the piano. I'll show them how to find those pitches on the piano. Advantages to really focusing on singing in the first part of the child's training is, first of all, they're going to be really developing an accurate sense of pitch, and also they're relating to the pitch as being sort of like the center of music making. If you start initially on violin and like, here's this tape and here's this tape and you're going to put your finger here and your finger here, then it's a very sort of like positional way of relating to pitch, and they start to relate to pitch as being a location where they put their finger. Whereas if they're really oriented in the flowy world of finding notes with their voice and like listening to it and locating it and matching their teacher, they're starting to really understand pitch as something that's fluid and something that you sort of correct using your ear. And then when they play violin, if something sounds a little off, it's very natural for them to move that finger to the right location. Another advantage to starting with singing is that it's so participatory. They're singing with their parent. If they have younger siblings, they're singing along to all the songs on the CD with their younger siblings. Even the solfege aspect of that, the younger siblings are typically going to learn the solfege along with them. And so this is really a very family-oriented activity. It's so enjoyable for them. And that CD is usually their favorite CD. Whenever they get in the car, they're going to usually ask for the Kaleidoscope CD. I can't tell you how many parents have come back to me and said, I was playing something else and they told me that I needed to put that CD in. So it's a bonding time, and it's part of the fabric of their world. So this is some of the magic of teaching folk songs, is that it's on the perfect level for the child. And that is really also a part of the Kodai approach, is that these are folk songs. These are songs that have been tested over years and centuries. They are something that reaches very deep into the heart of not only the culture, but something about our humanity. And the reason that they've lasted for centuries is because they're really good songs. Now, Suzuki has lots of songs that we use as teaching songs. Monkey Song, it's a great teaching song. It goes up in a scale, it comes back down in a scale. It's cute. It's a good song. It's not a great song. People around the world are not singing Monkey Song. All of the songs that have been chosen for this method are genuine folk songs. They've been hammered out over time. There's something perfect and complete about these songs, and the child really responds to that and recognizes it. The text of the song is also something that the child really relates to very strongly. The topics of the songs are so varied, and the history of each of the songs is really unique and interesting, and it's a wonderful medium for really talking about a lot of different things and pulling in the illustrations of the book. So it creates an incredibly rich context for the child to connect with themselves, to connect with their family, and to connect with aspects of history that they otherwise wouldn't come into contact with. Kaleidoscope's method uses movable dose solfege, and it uses it in a way that's slightly different from the Kodai application of the same thing. In the beginning of the Kaleidoscope's training, the movable dose solfege is actually used as a rote device. The solfege words are on the CD that the child is listening to, during their car ride at home, or as they're playing with their toys. So that rote activity of hearing the solfege, they're actually memorizing the pitch names of the song. Now, when they're hearing the names of the solfege, those names don't necessarily have a meaning to them. It may as well be a foreign language. It's just, some nonsense syllables. As they start to play piano, and later on as they start to play violin, it starts to come into focus, like, oh, do actually means this, and re actually means this. And if they get the solfege wrong, it's not just getting a nonsense syllable wrong. It actually, it's like, oh, that made the wrong sound. Oh, now I know why that's me and not re. So we're using the solfege as a rote device in the beginning. Now, as the method develops, that solfege starts to really take on another life. It's showing them the tonal aspects of the music that they're playing. So for example, triads start to show up, like Skip to My Lou. Mi, do, mi, 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 so. Now they have the tonic triad. The dominant tonic relationship on Bingo, so, do, so, la, so, do. That really is evident, and it shows up in many songs. So they'll hear that so, do relationship in several of their Book 1 songs. And they'll even point out during the lesson, like, oh yeah, I had that pattern in this other song. And for them, because these songs are really, they don't know a lot of songs at this point. So it really is it stands out a lot for them when they see that same pattern show up, and they notice it way faster than I do as the teacher. Because, you know, as the teacher, I've heard, you know, thousands of songs, but for them, like those patterns, they really anchor strongly to them. The leading tone relationship, Yankee Doodle, do, do, re, mi, do, mi, re, do, do, re, mi, do, ti. And that T often is an extended finger on the violin. It might be a lowered first finger, but it's always going to be a half step below the tonic, and they're starting to really put together the solfege patterns with what that maps onto for their violin. They'll notice very soon on, very early on in their study, that fa is typically a lowered pitch. In all of the scales that they do, that's always the first sort of secret note that they find when they move from one key to the next key in that circle of fifths. They're always going to have to lower that fa if they're going in the flat direction. If they're going in the sharp direction, the secret note is always going to be that next T that they haven't had before, and that'll be the extended third finger or whatever it is. So the solfege is really illuminating the tonality, which is one of the reasons that I really love that movable do. It's a very tonal oriented system. Now, a lot of European teachers have grown up inside of a fixed do system, and that's so natural for those teachers, and I totally get that. For a teacher who's grown up in a fixed do world, movable do, it's almost like an allergy. It's very hard for those teachers to even conceive of singing the note C and singing it with a different solfege other than do. And that's fine. Not everyone has to use this system. It's totally, you know, the comfort zone of whoever you are. But there's a lot of real advantages to the movable do in terms of teaching transposition and in terms of starting to understand that whole world of like how all of these patterns fit together. Teaching half steps, teaching relative minor. There's a language for talking about all these concepts that otherwise can be extremely abstract and very mathematical and hard for the child to really see. The solfege map is another way that we make those relationships apparent to the child. In the back of all of the Kaleidoscopes book is a map starting from do and going stepwise all the way up to the high do, and the notes are placed in their relative positions, so the whole steps are spaced out more. From mi to fa, from ti to do are the half steps. We'll talk explicitly about that, and I'll have them play the scale and notice the hugging fingers for the half steps. I'll quiz them on that, so they really are remembering that there's always a half step from mi to do, from mi to fa and from ti to do. So we're bringing, we're helping them feel those half steps in their voice. We're showing them the half steps visually. They're feeling the half steps in their hand on the violin. So all of those relationships are really kind of coming together, and it's all making sense, and the child is fitting these things into a very robust system that really starts to become more and more clear over time. So the rote aspect of the movable do is apparent, is used at the beginning, but as they progress through the system, we're moving away from that rote relationship to where they're really owning this material, and they're really using the movable do system to make sense of the patterns for themselves. So increasingly they own those relationships, and it's no longer rote. Now it's something that they themselves understand. Solfege is a really wonderful way to learn the kinds of things that a lot of teachers teach by doing finger numbers or by doing the names of the notes. But the nice thing about solfege is that it's presenting that same information in a musical context. Now, the Suzuki philosophy is that you want the child to learn by ear, but in my experience, it's very, very difficult for a child to simply by ear find a location on the violin. The violin is not a super complicated instrument to find your way around on, but for a 4-year-old, it's really complicated. It's a rare 4-year-old who's able to simply sing a song and then locate those notes on the violin. It's really nice to have a tool that helps them get there in kind of a natural way. So like do is here, re is here, mi is here, fa is here, and then we go up to the next string. And then they have those songs that they map that on to the solfege that they've already figured out. The Suzuki philosophy of learning by ear is wonderful in terms of we do want the child to have an oral relationship with the violin. In Kodai, we also have that same goal, but we accomplish it in a different way. The way that we accomplish it in Kodai is by having the child do a lot of singing and do exercises that are oriented to help them make sense of the pitches that they're hearing. It's not necessary to deprive a child of the opportunity to learn how to read music in order to develop the by ear skills.